I'm absolutely so sick of IGN. They are the worst quote unquote journalists when it comes to gaming. They are absolutely terrible. Their opinions should not be respected. They're always doing bullshit, okay? So now they're coming at Resident Evil 5 and saying Resident Evil 5 is a racist game. And I made a video not too long ago touching on that topic because a random journalist said the same thing. And Resident Evil 5 has been very controversial since its launch. Uh, I don't understand why. It don't matter if it was Resident Evil, Metal Gear Solid, any other game series. If the game is taking place in Africa, guess what? There's going to be a lot of black people. And the main thing I hate with this argument that Resident Evil 5 is racist is Resident Evil 4, you're literally taking out Spaniards. You don't see people saying that's racist. But when it comes to a game set in Africa and the story of Resident Evil 5, first, IGN misconstrues, however you say it. Nigga, I'm tongue tied right now. They definitely did not pay attention to the story of Resident Evil 5 because they were trying to stop the things that were happening to the African people in Resident Evil 5. And I didn't watch this video, but there was they dropped the article first on Twitter, and they were getting so much hate that they turned the comments off, which is a pansy ass move. Even the context thing that comes when people are lying on Twitter or Twitter has to clarify everything. This article misconstrues the story of Resident Evil 5. IGN rated the original RE5 a 9 out of 10. Now, clearly, that's a damn shame. That's the little AI, whatever you want to call it, is correcting them because they are misconstruing the story. Now, for the 9 out of 10 thing, I will give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the 9 out of 10 because back then it's not the same people that are working at IGN now. For the most part, I'm pretty sure there's new journalists, quote unquote journalists, at IGN, so different opinions vary. So the 9 out of 10 thing is not really valid because that's somebody else take on RE5 that worked at IGN at the time. But I want to watch this video and then I want to do some ranting and, some debunking. I will be pausing the video or whatever. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I do reactions, rants on gamings, even anime here and there.
4's release last year, Capcom's project to remake the glory years of its survival horror series is complete. But as the game's post-credit scene suggests, the remakes aren't over. And so the big question is, where next? The obvious answer is a remake of Resident Evil 5. But on the game's 15th anniversary, it's clear that moving forward chronologically will take Capcom's remakes into the series' weakest era, an era of gameplay and narrative decisions.
Okay, so the stigma on RE5, a lot of people back then did not like RE5, but as the years passed, everybody started loving RE5. I loved RE5 to begin with. I was absolutely fiending for Resident Evil 5. Coming home, I was in middle school when RE5 came out. I think I was like a freshman. I mean, a sixth grader or whatever. Coming home, I could not wait to go look for Resident Evil 5 to go buy. And it was sold out for weeks on week. That's how big this game was. So it was real split down the middle, but I think nowadays more people will sit there and say, oh no, I love this game.
Best left in the past. Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, at least not to the standards of Capcom's best work. And so the answer is not to remake, but to rewrite.
I absolutely do not think Resident Evil 5 is the weakest entry point of Resident Evil. If somebody says that, they're full of shit, because there is a game called Resident Evil 6 that almost tanked the whole series down. And Resident Evil 6 was absolutely abysmal. That game was just horrible. If it didn't have Resident Evil attached to it, it still would have been a horrible ass game. So I don't think Resident Evil 5 is the weakest entry point. Resident Evil 5 is one of my favorite Resident Evils of all time. It just is what it is. I love Resident Evil 5. The story's better than Resident Evil 4's. I don't even think that's a controversial take at all. Resident Evil 4's story was very cliche. It was like a cliche Hollywood movie type of, story, which is nothing wrong because the whole series is cheesy, don't get me wrong. But Resident Evil 5's story was so much better. People just want to stir up controversy. This game will be controversial regardless how you slice it. This game is going to take place in Africa. This game is absolutely getting remade. They already showed it at the end of the RE4 and the credits. This game is absolutely getting remade. Whether you like it or not, it's getting a remake. So there's nothing you can do to stop it. You can bitch, moan, complain. It's going to happen. Now, do they need to rewrite the story? Yeah, I think they could make it better than what it was. I enjoyed the story for what it was, but they could make it better. They always can make it better. Do I want them to? Absolutely not. I mean, I don't mind either or. They can go with either either route. But in my opinion, if since they're remaking this game, all I would love to see them do when it comes to remaking RE5 is actually putting some horror into the game, making it scary. Maybe change the way co-op work. If you're gonna do the co-op thing with AI partner or whatever, make them smarter because Sheva was a pain in the ass to play with in RE5. So make them smarter, but I was just like a little bit more horror or a lot more horror in the RE5 remake. That's just me. I don't feel like they have to sit there and just rewrite every single thing when it comes to the story because people want to quote unquote call it racist. That shit is so stupid to me. Nobody was complaining about RE4. If you put RE in Connecticut, guess what bodies are dropping more? So come on, man. Like you can't just sit there and call a game racist. It's taking place in Africa. There's black people in Africa, predominantly black people. Stop it. Cut it out. That's just oh man. I sorry for the rants, but I will be pausing a lot.
Resident Evil is a survival horror series. Not that you'd know that playing Resident Evil 5. Sure, it features a constant flow of horrific imagery, but Resident Evil 5 is an action game through and through. That's evident in its cover shooter mechanics.
So is RE4. I hate when people do this with RE5. It's just nothing but an action game. It's just action. Resident Evil 4 is a pure action game as well. There is very minimal horror in Resident Evil 4, very minuscule. There is not a lot of horror in Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 3 was not a horror game. Resident Evil 3 was absolutely an action game. In fact, Resident Evil 3 is the one that started the action shit in the series. Come on, man.
Mechanics, vehicle chases with on-rails turret sequences, and the constant rattle of assault rifles. Even its visual design evokes the sandy shades of modern military games that experienced mass popularity in the late 2000s. It all speaks to a series that had lost its way. Rather than reflect on the tenet...
And another thing, when Resident Evil 5 dropped, it was an era of just hardcore action. Like you had Metal Gear, you had Gears of War, you had stuff like that, and all games had like this piss filter. That's what you call the filter on RE5. How it looks is people refer it as the piss filter. So action was just what was popular back then. Capcom seen the hype and the love that RE4 got. Because RE4 is an action games. There's AKs, there's pistols, drop kicking, all these action kicks, knife fights, everything. Everybody loved RE4, so they looked at it like, okay, this is the era of action. We're just gonna continue. We're just gonna add more onto RE5. We're gonna add way more action. Did they go over the top with it? Yes, they absolutely did. But that's what they thought the people wanted because everybody loved RE4 and everybody loved RE3. They basically gave the people what they thought they wanted, and you see how that turned out. Well, RE5 is not hated, but a lot of people complain there's just too much action. If you're saying that but enjoyed RE4, I kind of call you a hypocrite on that end. They're both action heavy. You can literally walk around RE4 with a Tommy gun with infinite ammo. That you don't get more action than that. So come on now.
That were the foundation of its experience, Resident Evil 5 looked to the contemporary gaming zeitgeist in an attempt to find a new lease of life. The result is an unholy hybrid of Resident Evil, Gears of War, and Call of Duty. Yes, it's as ugly and unwieldy as it sounds. This design appears to not just be a misguided attempt to follow Western successes, but also a misreading of its predecessor. With Resident Evil 4, director Shinji Mikami deftly reinvented the series through the use of a new over-the-shoulder camera angle. The perspective allowed for a more kinetic...
But come on, look at everything of RE4 as a whole. I wouldn't say it's a misreading, because it's basically, it plays exactly like RE4. It plays exactly like RE4. It's just a little bit more action than RE4. But RE4 had some of the most over-the-top action sequences ever in Resident Evil. So I really don't blame Capcom for thinking that's what people wanted more of. I really do not fault them for that. I fault them for RE6 because then they just literally went Michael Bay with the bullshit. But
heavy game. Despite this, Mikami never lost sight of the terror at the core of Resident Evil. Through the use of enemies that were strategically placed to provide undulating waves of tension and fear, and the inclusion of Ashley as your vulnerable charge, combat encounters were focused on surviving overwhelming horrors rather than dominating foes. Resident Evil 5, meanwhile, meanwhile, presents its enemies as waves to be gunned down with increasingly powerful weaponry. Their purpose is cannon fodder, a wall of meat to slow your progress through levels. And those levels are not locations to be explored. Instead, they are largely funnels that push you from entrance to exit. Resident Evil 4 may have replaced the series' traditional continuous structure with discrete levels in an attempt to move away from the backtracking-heavy design of previous games, but it preserved the spirit of locations like the Raccoon City police station. The village, Salazar's castle, and the island feature interlocking explorable paths.
Oh, and then, oh man, the island, you don't get more action heavy than that. The island is just straight up action. He literally sat here and said that RE5's level design when it comes to the enemies and stuff is just meant for the enemies to get gunned down. What the hell was RE4? RE4, there wasn't no horror. I wasn't like scared that, oh, these, not a horde of enemies, but oh, like these 4 or 5 enemies charging me. I didn't feel scared because I had all these weapons. There's freaking shotguns, machine guns, pistols, crossbows, rocket launchers, Tommy guns. I never felt fear playing RE4 because I know I had the weaponry, grenades, all this stuff. There's endless amount. You got army weaponry in RE4, so I think that's highly false saying that RE5's design was just, oh, the enemies are just meant to be gunned down. No, RE5's design is just like RE4's when it comes to enemies. They're not massive hordes, but there's like 5 or 6 enemies coming at you at once, and you have the weaponry to deal with. There's no sense of horror from either game. The only thing horror related in RE4 was the regenerators because they were creepy as hell. RE5 had like one little segment of horror when it came to the liquors. That was it. So Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5 is not far off. I'm just saying.
Ways that solidify these locations as authentic spaces rather than obstacle courses. Resident Evil 5 has no interest in this, with the majority of its stages being little more than corridors peppered with dead ends to hide treasures in. Their lack of authenticity means no one will ever mention the Kijuju Autonomous Zone in the same breath as the Spencer Mansion. All this is to say that a faithful remake of Resident Evil 5 would break Capcom's 7-year streak of brilliant survival horror games.
That is complete bullshit. That this really break Capcom's streak of remakes and just brilliant Resident Evil games? I don't think so, man, because one, a lot of people were disappointed with RE3 Remake, so I wouldn't completely put RE3 Remake in the winners category. I enjoyed it. I didn't think RE3 Nemesis back in the day was all that to begin with. So I thought the remake was decent. They could have done a lot better. It was a little disappointing, but it was not a bad game or remake at that. But Capcom definitely took a little dip, just a slight little tripped over a rock a little bit, stumbled. I mean, but I just think it's crazy saying RE5, remaking RE5 would just ruin the streak that Capcom is on. How? RE5 is not a bad game. I truly don't understand. I really just don't. I just don't get the blind hate on RE5 when it comes to these journalists, these quote unquote journalists, because it's just. I feel like it's a lazy attempt to just get some shit stirring, in my opinion.
It's telling that the series' reset point, Resident Evil 7, was a reinvention of the very first game, a haunted house that grew ever larger as you unlocked new rooms by solving its puzzles. Clever reinventions of this base conceit is the key to Resident Evil's success, be that dropping an unstoppable force into the house's corridors, such as Resident Evil 2's Mr. X, or expanding the scope of the house. Resident Evil Village's titular location is effectively a giant manor. Its corridors are streets, and its rooms are houses.
Matter of fact, now that they bring up Village, Village is a heavy action game as well. Village is not a horror game. Village is not horror survival. It's absolutely not. RE Village, the problem I have with RE Village, and surprisingly, as much as I loved RE Village, it's one of the most unreplayable Resident Evil games in my opinion. I don't like going back and replaying this game for the simple matter of it's a great game. I do love Village, but I hate that one little horror section they had in the house. I forgot her name, the doll lady, the doll maker. That portion was brilliant. That was one of the best areas in the series as a whole. And then after that, it just goes to just another high octane action sequence, especially at Heisenberg's house, which is one of the most poor designed areas in Resident Evil as a whole. They didn't stick with the horror because the horror was so brilliant from the doll maker's house. The game kind of tailed off a little bit. So then when you replay it, the horror doesn't hit no more because you already know what to expect. Again, you're talking about another action Resident Evil game.
The 5's stage-driven structure is simply inferior to this design. A modern recreation of it would only further highlight its flaws, especially coming in such close proximity to masterclasses like the remake of Resident Evil 2.
Just because those games came out doesn't mean they can't put out 5. That's not gonna dip anything. It's really not, because they failed to mention RE3 remake came right after RE2 or after fucking what, Village? Didn't it come after Village? I forgot the timeline, but it wasn't too far off. So you can't say, oh, if they make this, it's gonna throw dirt on RE2 and it's gonna make it look bad. No, it's not. No. RE3 came out. Come on.
Remakes can, of course, completely redefine the structure of their source material.
That's
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for example, is recognisably an updated version of the classic RPG, but its world design and gameplay mechanics are a world apart from the 1997 original. And so you could argue that Resident Evil 5 is actually the Resident Evil most in need of a remake. A whole new environmental structure and
that I can somewhat agree with. But Code Veronica X. No, I think Code Veronica X is the one that needs the remake treatment the most out of any Resident Evil game. Because I think Resident Evil 5 absolutely aged well. I don't think it aged poorly. Unless you're like one of those people that can't get past the fact that you got to stop while aiming. Because I know that was a big thing to like newcomers to the Resident Evil series. They couldn't get past the, oh, I can't move and shoot at the same time. Okay, cool. But other than that, our Resident Evil Code Veronica X has tank controls and all of that. Like that, maybe Outbreak, I feel like those games I would have put in the forefront for a remake before 5. But 5 could use a remake. It for sure wasn't in dire need of a remake. Just leave 6. Act like 6 never happened. That's
scenario design that reins in the action and dials up the horror would bring it in line with Capcom's other remakes. But all of this doesn't account for Resident Evil 5's most notorious problem: racism.
You see how they did that bullshit? They just tried to ease their way into just hurry up and saying, "Oh, it's racist." That's all it was. It was just filler to get to the point of calling the game racist. That's the main thing they trying to get off. Because all that, oh man, it's an action game. You can't remake this. It's a pure action game. The game design, that's bullshit, bro. It's especially nowadays with how technology has gotten better. Do you know how better the co-op would be in RE5 compared to the older one? Pfft, come on now. People wouldn't mind the action. Trust me, they wouldn't.
Set in a fictional West African country, Resident Evil 5's primary antagonists are black people. Yes, it's technically the Ouroboros virus that protagonist Chris Redfield is fighting, but the parasite's host is depicted as a nation of mobs and primitives who are violent even...
So if Chris Redfield wasn't white and they had a black guy, they would just be like, "Oh, you're encouraging black on black violence." Like there was no win in this. Like really, there was no absolute win in this. You're encouraging black on black violence and this game is not good because of it. Like, come on, bro. It don't matter what game series it is. If you set a game placed in Africa, you're gonna be going against black people. It's just, come on now. It's common sense. That doesn't mean it's racist.
For their infection. Intentionally or not, Resident Evil 5 positions Africa as the Dark Continent, an uncivilized world harboring a diseased population that needs gunning down via Western intervention in the name of global security. This insensitive treatment of people of colour was hotly debated even as early as Resident Evil 5's debut trailer, with writers such as Ngai Kroll and Stephen Totillo pointing out the game's uncomfortable post-colonial imagery. The arguments and think pieces continue...
Okay, so I was going to show this video after I finished this, but this is the beta of Resident Evil 5. This was like, I think maybe 2 years before its initial launch, they were showing a trailer, and Sheva wasn't even thought of. This is for the people that just don't know this. Sheva wasn't even in this game. It was supposed to be Chris by himself, and there were large hordes of enemies in RE5 just chasing. Like, I mean, it looked like about 20 people chasing after Chris in this trailer. I don't know what made them take this away because that looked fun as hell. It couldn't have been the backlash because they didn't take it out of Africa. I don't even think the backlash was that crazy up until the games after the game's launch. Really, yeah, people tried to get this off about, oh, it's just a game about taking out Africans. Like, nah.
Well into the game's release
Look
window,
at the
with
amount of
IGN's own
people,
former
like-
editor-in-chief Hilary Goldstein having also wrestled with the subject. But that was 2009, a time when race was apparently a debate
that whore,
rather than a
man.
reality. In the 2020s, in a post-Black Lives Matter world, there is only one acceptable response to a white man shooting waves of Africans for an entire video game. No.
Now I could see if Chris like came to Africa and he just had this giant ass rope or something like that. I can see that. I'd be like, all right, look, Capcom, my got a little Jimmy Jim in them, you know what I mean? But that was not the case at all, bro. Just because a long time protagonist is in Africa trying to save people in this region doesn't make it racist.
I have a job to do, and I'm gonna see it through.
Remakes may be able to redefine their source material, but there's only so many changes you can make until it's not a remake at all, but an entirely new game. And if
Why nobody say nothing about the Spaniards in RE4? I don't understand. A white man taking out Spaniards? Nobody cares about that? Nobody's gonna make up some bullshit ass article over that? Come on, bro.
you take Africa out of Resident Evil 5, is it Resident Evil 5 anymore?
No.
Even with a vastly improved, more sensitive take on the continent, perhaps one with a black protagonist and a more empathetic look at the outbreak, the experience would simply be too divorced from the original to hold the name Resident Evil 5. So where does Capcom go now? Personally, I'd look backwards. Code Veronica is an ideal candidate, as is the original Resident.
Now, yes, Code Veronica definitely needs a remake. Take controls, pixelated graphics. Well, not pixelated because it looked good on PS2 and I believe it was on GameCube, so it didn't look bad on those consoles. But definitely an older game. I think Code Veronica initially came out on the Dreamcast. Old ass game. Definitely needs a treatment, especially because it's really the true sequel to Resident Evil 2. You definitely can't go wrong with that. I don't know about the original Resident Evil. The original Resident Evil is a fucking remake, if we're going to be honest. I don't think it's a remaster. I think it's a remake. I don't think that needs to be touched.
Is chronologically forward, then a total rewrite of what comes next is the logical path. Because what followed Resident Evil 4 was not one terrible game, but two. Resident Evil 6 double...
Terrible. Oh my god, bro. Like, why do people do this, bro? Resident Evil 5 was not terrible. Now, I know gaming is all opinionated. Don't get me wrong. Resident Evil 6 was absolutely fucking abysmal. It was absolutely tragic what happened. It literally almost derailed the series. But RE5 being terrible. RE5 was the best-selling RE game. I don't know if it currently still is right now, but for the longest of time, RE5 was the best-selling RE game. You look on YouTube, people enjoy the hell out of RE5, especially when you play it with friends. Nothing beats that because the co-op is so damn good. The mercenaries mode, everything. RE5 have so much good shit. So much good shit. So I don't like the fact that you're calling this a terrible game because it's quote unquote racist. So don't call RE5 terrible because you believe it's racist and you're trying to get some brownie points from the black community, because at the end of the day, no, we're not dumb. We're not dumb. Just because you trying to pander to the black community or whatever, it's not gonna work, bro. Common sense. It's not that deep.
No, triple down on the action-packed, set-piece heavy shooter design, to the extent that much of it could be mistaken for a third-person Call of Duty spin-off were it not for the monsters. Its restrictive level design practically puts you in a chokehold, forcing you to endure a barrage of bombastic moments that have no interest in evoking any sense of fear. Resident Evil 6 is a survival horror, only in that it's a horrible game that you have to survive playing. But this time around, it doesn't have to be like that. Capcom now has the opportunity to ignore the past and completely reinvent this chunk of the timeline. In Resident Evil 4 Remake's post-credit scene, evil mastermind Albert Wesker details his plans for world domination to Ada Wong. Reflected in his glasses is an image of Excella Gion and the Stairway of the Sun, two significant plot elements from Resident Evil 5, which indicates Capcom's intentions. But there's more to consider. This scene is largely a replication of the sequence from Assignment Ada, a non-canon chapter from the original Resident Evil 4. Its shift from unofficial to canon points to a willingness to change. Furthermore, the end of this scene is completely rewritten. When learning of Wesker's plans, rather than dutifully deliver the stolen Las Plagas sample to him, Ada betrays her shadowy boss and forces her helicopter to turn around. In this moment, the future of Resident Evil becomes unclear. Capcom has given itself the freedom to do whatever it wants. I just hope it's not a remake of Resident Evil 5.
Alright, Bozo. No, Resident Evil 5 is 100% happening. 1,000%. Nothing is going to stop an RE5 remake. They wouldn't have showed that post-credit sequence with the stairs of the sun and Excella if there wasn't going to be a Resident Evil 5 remake. Capcom has made it known they're going to remake the full series. And I'm glad they did, because look at every remake besides maybe 3. They have enhanced every game significantly, and they're all hit. Again, probably minus 3. 3 is like it's solid. I give it like a 7 out of 10. It didn't move the needle for me. It was cool. Just how they did Nemesis, they kind of messed it up. So other than that, they have been on the money. RE5 will be nothing short of amazing. And if not, they can make it 10 times better than they did in the original. So I'm not sitting here saying, I'm not going to sit here and be one of those fake woke people. Oh, they shouldn't do it because it's in Africa, bro. Go outside, touch grass, do something, bro. Stop crying. I think old boy here is a complete fucking clown, to be blunt. And, yeah.
For more on how Capcom is altering the series, check out our...
And then, you know the shit didn't hit, because IGN is a big, very big page on YouTube. 18 million subscribers. They lucky YouTube doesn't do the like and dislike ratio thing anymore. 2.1 likes. And you have, what, 120k views. I can imagine the dislikes. I'm going to dislike it. Fuck them. Alright, so I just want to look at the comments real quick. Let's just look at this shit. As a native Nigerian, y'all really got to stop being offended for us. Exactly. RE4 Spaniard enemies, thumbs up. RE5 African enemies, thumbs down. Exactly my whole point. My whole point with this, just even talking about this, their points are not valid. Even beforehand, when they're trying to talk about the enemy design and the level design and all that, it's all invalid, because all you're doing is trying to nitpick shit. Even though RE4 has the same exact thing as RE5, you're nitpicking just so you can get to the point to say, okay, the real reason why we don't think it should be remade is because it's racist. Because all the other shit that you're complaining about, literally Resident Evil 4 does. So all that shit is null and void. RE5 Remake says the white man living in the UK. You weren't crying like this when a bunch of Spaniards were getting shot in the RE4 remake. Exactly. Spanish people living like it's the Middle Ages was okay in RE4, but doing a similar depiction of Africa in RE5 is not okay. Exactly. And the thing is with RE5, I wish I could have recorded some gameplay to prove the point, but RE5 explains why everything is happening, like the notes and everything, why some of the Africans look like the because there's a section in RE5 that has this depiction of Africans, like they had these giant masks on, and you know, the spears and everything. And it's kind of like a cartoony way to paint the African tribes, because tribes are a real thing. They are completely isolated from the real world. They're literally living like it's all the way back in the day. They have not been in contact with civilization. I'm pretty sure some of y'all know this. That's a real thing. But the way they kind of did it was kind of cartoony. And Capcom had in the notes why they look like that. And I advise you, if you don't know about that, just go research it. I wish I could have recorded that, but that took too much time. But Capcom explains every reason why this is happening. Why do the enemies look like this, and etc, etc. If this bozo actually paid attention to the story as a whole, because again, they are trying to stop what's going on in Africa. But I digress. This is the dumbest thing I've seen today. Nothing in this video proves why it can't be remade. You gave RE5 a 9 out of 10, by the way, which is facts. So zombies should be what in Africa? Irish? Exactly. But y'all see the point. Everybody is crucifying them. Someone at IGN, fire this guy. Fire all of these people at IGN, because they all are clowns when it comes to this journalism stuff, bro. But the people as a whole at IGN thought this was okay to publish and upload. It's clown activity. That's why nobody respects IGN. The only people that respect IGN is the people that work at IGN. As usual, we don't hate journalists as much as they really deserve, and I 100% agree with that. But you don't see not one black person complaining about this. Not one. None. So what does that tell you? It ain't that deep. We understand it's a video game. It's a protagonist that been in RE for quite some time, trying to save what's going on in Africa. What more has to be said? Like, I genuinely lost brain cells listening to this and looking at the article. I thought journalists were supposed to be very smart, intellectual, all this other stuff. You know what I'm saying? Supposed to actually pay attention to detail was supposed to be on point. This is what y'all went to school for? If you went to school for all them years to be a journalist and you're coming up with shit like this, you failed in life. You wasted all your time. Just saying. There's people that ain't even been into a college that got a better mindset and understanding of story and everything than this bozo. I don't know, man. IGN got to get it together, man. I don't know. Well, they'll never get together because IGN always does clownish shit. Always. Like leaking information that shouldn't be. Like, I could go on and on about IGN, you feel me? I done got it off my chest because I was getting really fucking pissed off about just reading that, bro. It had me, like, irritated because I'm just so sick of these fake journalists and bringing up, oh man, because BLM this game shouldn't be remade. Shut up, man. Like, it's not that deep. It's just really not that deep. You don't see black people complain. You got people in Nigeria saying this shit ain't that serious. If you don't knock it off, like, come on. Yeah, so yeah, IGN in the mud again. Absolutely cooked, fried, baked, all of that, sauteed, everything. Shit is blasphemy, man. Yeah, so that's really all I got to say. If you made it to the end of this long ass video, I appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.